Welcome to Dan's Bike Show. I'm Dan. Today, I would like to cover several topics. First, there will be a brief update on Project USA Bike Challenge. Then, I'll introduce a segment called Bike Stories. That will segue into my next project. And finally, I have some observations about cycling culture in Atlanta. Here are the US-made machine crank bolts from Project USA Bike Challenge. They're made to print from pre-hardened chromoly. They're not necessarily self-extracting crank bolts. Typically, self-extracting crank bolts have an 8mm socket head, where this is designed with a hex head. The crank bottom bracket connection is a taper fit, so once the cranks are properly installed, screw force is generally required to remove the crank from that interference fit. Self-extracting type crank bolts have an additional ring that threads into the crank arm, so that when the bolt is turned counterclockwise, it not only removes itself from the bottom bracket, but it also pushes on the additional part, removing the crank from the bottom bracket. I have a US-made Park collarless crank puller, so having a self-extracting crank bolt was not a design requirement in this case. Next, I'm going to move on to a new segment called Bike Stories. I'm going to try to include a bike story in every episode from now on, just a short anecdote involving cycling in some way. Today's story is going to also be a clever segue into my next project. My special lady friend was interested in road riding, so I tuned up the Yuck Bike for her to ride. It's a 1979 Takara that I mentioned in episode 5. I wanted to see if she enjoyed riding before we dropped some bank on new wheels for her. She did enjoy riding, so we rode. One day we decided to go to the local bike shop. It's about 14 miles away. When we got there, we saw a bike that she already test rode and was marked down for an end-of-season clearance. We bought it on the spot and left the Yuck at the shop. She rode home on the new wheels. By the time we got home, she had already formed some strong opinions about how the two bikes compared. She far preferred the integrated shifters and brake levers on the new bike over the down tube shifters on the Yuck Bike, but I was a little surprised to learn that she liked the Yuck frame better than the new bike. I just assumed the new bike would ride better because it was new, and there was a lot of propaganda behind new bikes telling us that they're better. I quickly realized that the 1979 lugged and brazed steel frame should indeed be more comfortable than the oversized hydroform, swagged, butted, and marketed aluminum. Nothing against aluminum, but she likes the ride of steel. Also, I'm discovering that there's some hype in bikes marketed towards women. I always assumed that since women had proportionally shorter legs and longer torsos, that ladies' frames would have shorter seat tubes and longer top tubes. This is not the case. The Yuck Bike does indeed have a longer top tube, and she seems to prefer this. You may not have noticed, but I already performed that clever segue into the next project. I plan to strip down the Yuck, paint it a color that is desirable to my special lady friend, and build it back up with components from the new road bike. Stay tuned, I have a little twist or two planned already. A funny thing happened on the way to episode number 4. During my visit to the big city, my interviewees insisted that we attend the Little 5 Points Halloween parade before commencing the interviews. The parade was interesting for a number of reasons, but for me it was interesting to see how many people either arrived by bike or participated on bike. As one pair of cyclists rode by dressed as zombies before the parade started, I didn't get a picture of them unfortunately, it occurred to me that Atlanta has a special affinity for zombies. I can't say that I understand it, but I'm not against it. In fact, I came to realize that if every zombie enthusiast in Atlanta were also a bicycle enthusiast, we would probably rank among Minnesota, Portland, and Austin as a serious bicycling town. Nothing against Atlanta, of course. I'm very proud of all the people I saw there on bicycle. So, I propose that here in the greater Atlanta metropolitan area, zombies and cyclists unite. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Dan's Bike Show, and be sure to let all your bike and zombie friends know about it.